Welcome, live streamers. It's the pre-show. It's the pre-show of the show for the thing, for the Network Plus study group. I believe I might be able to make it through this. Maybe. All right, let's paste in a thing there. For those of you watching on the replay, can fast forward about 9 minutes, and we should get started. Start recording right here. Recording here. Re-recording. Yep, there's my Cylons. Recording here. Yep, we're recording on the YouTube. And you can tell I'm a little raspy. Hi, how you doing? How's everybody doing today? I hope you're doing well. Yeah, it's really me. That's really me talking. It is it's recovery time, trying to recover from a cold that started on the last study group last week and has lasted until now. It's been a fantastic week. Wish you could have been here. Live stream's working. Look how nice it is outside. Middle of January, 66 degrees, going to get up into the 70s today. No birds, though. No activity. You can see it's been kind of cold, though. Some of the plants not looking so good out in the garden. They're a little bit hit by the cold weather. Others doing well. Some of the plants we have out there are evergreen. They last through the winter. Some don't. It'll be nicer when the winter gets here. I know. It's just horrible here. A couple days ago, it did get into freezing. It got into the 20s. We had to bring plants in. And now it's 70s. So that's my week. That's how things go here. That is birdfeeder.live. That's in my backyard. That is, you can see it from where I am sitting. If the curtains weren't closed, you'd be able to see it. I close all the curtains up for the live stream. There's quite a bit of green. You can't see the yard. The yard's still green. It did not turn very brown so far this season. Usually it does. Usually there's a little bit of dead grass and then it comes back. That is rosemary next to the feeder right down there. Good eye. I love rosemary. I have it everywhere. So wherever I'm walking, I kind of grab it, kind of crunch it a little bit in my hands just so you can smell it. Just it goes everywhere. It smells so good. Don't the dogs kill the grass? Why would the dogs kill the grass? They like to dig. That's something that kills pretty well, is they dig up stuff. But I guess you really couldn't see me looking at the rosemary. There it is. Had to look over my shoulder to see me looking at it, and that doesn't help. Yeah, we do often cut the rosemary off and use it when we're cooking things, sure. There's so much of it. Oh, look, there's Ladybug. Hello, Ladybug. Right up there. What's she doing? There she goes. What a fun little pre-show. We're getting now if some birds would show up, they probably eat the ladybug, though. Do birds eat ladybugs? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, I hope we can make it through here. Let's do a camera check. Check. Let's do a camera check. Start a presentation there. Get one going here. There we go. Camera 1. Hi. How you doing? Camera 2. The bird cam, which is not really a good name for the bird cam anymore. I called it the bird cam originally because it's kind of up in the air like a bird. But this is the bird cam, which is what's on my front screen. And the presentation screen, which is the same thing as this with me in it. Hi, how you doing? Oh, look how windy. Everyone knows it's windy. Back to this. Back. How are we doing on time? for 3.5 minutes, 4.5 minutes. Sorry. Going to be using the mute button a lot today. And drinking a lot of hot liquids. Ah. So, let's look at all my Twitter stuff. Let's see, the tweets should have gone out. Oh, they did. Look, the tweets are out, which means all of you are here. We can hide the Twitter now so that we're able to be productive. See how that works? I'm working on some things now, and I have to hide Twitter. And then when I'm done, I can bring Twitter back. But until then, the tweeter gets hidden. No more tweeter. New bird still at birdfeeder.live. I was hoping we'd see something. I guess we saw as much nature as we're going to see. We saw the ladybug go by. Let's see, are people here? I guess is the real question. I should look to see how many people are on the stream to make sure that we're actually doing something here. And there they are. Hi, everybody. Yes, you are here. Because it's kind of empty. You don't get a lot of direct feedback. I'll mention when we start the show, I will be looking at the chat room on professormesser.com/live, which is the live event chat. If you're on YouTube only, there's no chat there. I'm not looking at a chat there. There's no place to see a chat there, so I will not be looking at it. I'll be looking here. On professormesser.com/live. /live. Oh, what are we, a day away from a full moon? I always know. I called it in the chat room earlier today. Like, we're definitely going to be getting a full moon soon. Oh, I think I should start Skypey. Yes, I know it's not spelled Skypey. I know it's a different thing, but it's an inside joke. It's an inside joke. Not inside here, but inside somewhere else. An old joke. Oh, look, the ladybug's back. There she is. Right there. Getting some sun. Hey, stream's about to start. She doesn't care. She does not care. That's Sky Pi, isn't it? That's Skype B. I guess it could be Skype E. Skype I. Skypey. I should find some of the old Skypey references that I have somewhere. How are we on time? I'm just talking. Like there's a thing I have to do at some point. Are we going to do a thing? I don't know. I can't even see the ladybug anymore because my big head's in the way. There we go. See if we can see her. We got 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Oh, yeah, you need coffee. Go get coffee. I'll wait. I will not wait. It's definitely a ladybug. It is not an Asian beetle. I bought a bunch of ladybugs last spring, brought them here and released them into the yard. I think it was over 1,000. Well over 1,000. I think it was many thousands. We will talk about where the questions are in just a moment. I guess we can start. It's time. It's time for me to stop looking at ladybugs and do a live stream. So let's do exactly that. And where do we start? Where does this begin? Where do I go from here? Now that all the children have grown up. Here we go. Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2017 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. It's the beginning of a new year, and indeed, we're back for yet another year of study groups. Last week was our A Plus study group. This week, Network Plus is the topic at hand. And if you want to stick around here for another 7 days, next week at this time, we do a Security Plus study group. But today is all about Network Plus. I have a series of questions that I've created for you, and we will online answer them. We'll talk about why the questions were right. We'll talk about why your answers might have been wrong. And we'll go through a lot of different topics associated with Network Plus. In the second hour, I'll just open up the phone lines, and we tend to talk about anything when I have the phone lines open. I'll tell you in just a moment, though, how you can participate and answer the questions during this first hour. This is something I do every month. I couldn't do it without your support, of course. All of my Network Plus course videos are available to watch online, absolutely free. Just go to ProfessorMesser.com. There's a Network Plus link right there on the front page, and you can find all of my videos neatly indexed, ordered by the exam objectives. Makes it very easy to find exactly what you're looking for when you're studying. Of course, there's a lot of other things going on here. In fact, I have a lot of other products and other technologies and other ways to study on my website, not just the videos themselves. I'll talk a little bit about those as we go through this today. You can always watch what we're doing here at Messer Studios by going to ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter/YouTube/ whatever it happens to be, /Instagram/ anything, and you'll be able to see what we're doing. Also, don't forget, I'd like to put a little reminder here that you should not pay full price for your vouchers. If you're looking for a voucher discount, you can always go to ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers and get a discount when you're ready to take any of your CompTIA exams. Is my throat going to make it through the study group today is the real question of the day. For those of you who watched last week, I was beginning to get a cold, and then I got one. And now we're coming out of the cold. See how that timing worked? It worked perfect for you. Not so great for me. But I think we'll be able to make it today. I would not be able to do this without your ongoing support and of all of the things that we do here on the website. Some people like to have an offline version of the Network Plus videos, or they like to have some MP3s to listen to when they're traveling. Maybe they like my course notes. I've packaged all of these things together. You can find out about those at ProfessorMesser.com/GetNetPlus. And there you can find information on how you can have offline versions of all of my training videos, have everything in audio format as well. My course notes are included with this. I have a lot of those things that I have available to work on. There's a lot on my website, though, that you can get for absolutely free, not just my videos, but I've taken all of the questions that we've ever asked during these study groups, and I've put them into 20 question sample test blocks, something that you can go and look at on my website and take these for no money whatsoever. So if you go to ProfessorMesser.com/popquiz, it will bring you to a page. I think I have the pop quiz here. There it is. And you can take for Network Plus, boy, look at all the chats that are up. For Network Plus, 20, we've got 10 here. We got 10 quizzes here, 20 questions apiece. You do the math. There's 200 sample questions, all available. I don't think I have too much overlap there either. I've tried to deduplicate the pop quiz questions that are out there. So you might also want to have a look at those. They're there and available and absolutely free. So feel free to have a look at those too. That might be something that can help you. Now, I mentioned that you can answer questions. I'm going to ask questions today. You can answer them, and here's how you do it. You go to Socrative.com, open up a new browser window. There's also Socrative apps. You can download the Socrative Student app for your mobile device, and all you have to do is click on the student connection or student login button. The room name you want to put in, you have to make sure you spell it absolutely right, is Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser. If you don't spell it right, you won't be in the right room. Nothing will be there. There will be no questions. You want to be sure that you spell it absolutely correctly. And what's nice is once you are in the room and you're where you need to be, you don't touch anything else. You just sit there and the questions will come at you and you can answer them interactively. In fact, if you do it right, there will be a question up right now. Where's your next big trip? And you'll be able to answer it. You'll be able to, and I'll interactively be able to see you answering it. I've been watching people answer on my screen as things have come through. So you can see 26% of you said down the street, 38% of you said you're going to the great outdoors. A lot of people go to the great outdoors. Like to get out, get away from the computer for a bit. Don't mess with those things. You need to see something different. 17% said get to the closest beach, and then single digits for theme parks, casinos, and the theater. Not many people going to the theater for their vacation. It's one of those things, I guess, that people either like or they don't like to do. But that's a good way to test to see, is your Socrative working? If you don't see this question, you're probably in the wrong room. Make sure you go to ProfessorMesser.com or the Professor Messer room on Socrative, Socrative.com, click the student login, go to room name Professor Messer, just as it's spelled right here, ProfessorMesser, and you'll be in the right room. The Network Plus exam, and someone asked me about this yesterday, and said, are we going to get a new Network Plus exam? When is the next Network Plus exam coming? I guess they were concerned about their study time, and you don't have to be concerned at all. The latest Network Plus version came out in 2015. CompTIA tends to update their exams every 3 years. Network Plus is one that probably does not necessarily have to be updated every 3 years. It's one of those that the content within the exam doesn't tend to change a lot. Ethernet has been Ethernet for many, many tens of years at this point. Ethernet's not going to change. There are newer Ethernet technologies, so of course it's nice to have some of those newer technologies in the exam, and maybe some of the older things have been taken out. But right now, the Network Plus exam, pretty current, pretty modern. Everything in there pretty applicable to what you would find if you walked into a data center today and had to do some network management. So it's one of those things that does come in handy if you're ever trying to work through the details. But enough of that. Let's ask some questions. Let's ask some questions. I'm having a hard time communicating today. I apologize. My throat will make it, though, I promise you. So here is the question. One of the things, by the way, you'll notice on the exam, if you take the CompTIA Network Plus exam, is some of the first questions you get will be questions that are performance-based. They're going to be not multiple choice. They're not going to be, they might be fill in the blank. They might be matching. They might be putting things in order, which is what this one is. So don't answer in the chat room. I want you to answer. You can answer in Socrative, and I'll see the answers that you put up there. But you want to try this yourself. So here is a performance-based question for you to start things off. Sort these components by OSI layer, from lowest OSI layer to highest OSI layer. So maybe you can do this. The components are router, category 5 cable, firewall, switch, and content filter. So from lowest to highest, you should be able to put these in order. Now on your exam, you may be asked to put these in order by moving them around the screen, putting them in an actual order on the screen, maybe dragging and dropping. Maybe you put them in order 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You match them. It just depends on how it might be asked on the exam. But you should definitely go through and try to figure out what the lowest to highest category might be for these different components. Router, category 5 cable, firewall, switch, content filter. So you've got 5 things to figure out the orders that it might be from lowest to highest. Some of you are doing highest to lowest. You have to make sure you look at that very carefully, because I'm specifically asking from lowest OSI layer to highest OSI layer. The lowest being OSI layer 1. Here's a hint for you. The highest being OSI layer 7. So somewhere between 1 and 7 is where these fall. So I wonder what it might be. Well, the answers are, many of you are trying to Google this one, and I can tell by the number of people who are answering this one. Give it a shot. Try to figure it out. See if you can make a best guess, or at least in your mind, if you're not going to type it in your mind, figure out, where am I going to put number 1? What am I going to put number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and put those in that order into the right OSI models. Let's talk about OSI models for a moment. Since we're trying to figure out where things fit with the OSI layers, the OSI model. It's a model, by the way. It's not something you can point at and say, this is a real thing. This is something that really is a challenge, I think, for people who are starting off in networking, is that there's no real OSI model you can look at. You can't pull a box of a networking device and look at the specifications and have it say, this device corresponds to OSI layer, blah, 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 because it doesn't. Nothing says that. It's something, though, that we use whenever we're communicating with other people about the operation of the network. And in fact, there are a number of devices that you're working with that will immediately show you what version, what layer of the OSI model they're working with. So let's see how we're doing with this. The first layer of the OSI model is the physical layer. Now, we often think of the physical layer as being a physical thing. What this layer is really referring to is a signal. It's referring to, are we able to get these frequencies of data, of signal from one place to the other? And we often think of this as the cable, because that's what's carrying, or the fiber, that's what's carrying that signal across. So we often refer to layer 1 problems as a fiber or a cable problem, because it's having a problem getting that signal across. Layer 2 is where we fit devices like switches. Anything dealing with a MAC address or a layer 2 address. Across a wide area network, it might be a data link control address, because many wide area networks don't have traditional MAC addresses that you might have, but it still performs the same basic function. It's the physical address of the device, the most basic fundamental way to address a component. And the way that you do that on an Ethernet network is by a MAC address. And the devices that are able to determine how they would forward information by MAC addresses would be switches. So I would put switches at that OSI layer 2. Layer 3 is routers. Routers forward things based on an IP address. An IP address is a layer 3. There are many other layer 3 protocols out there in the world, for example. Before there was IP that was broadly used, a lot of people had Novell networks, and Novell had their own protocols, and their layer 3 protocol was called IPX. They also had a layer 3 protocol called SPX, kind of the TCP UDP. Before there was TCP UDP widely deployed, we used these very specific protocols from Novell that effectively did the same thing. They were layer 3 protocols. The most common, and really the only one you'll really run into these days, is TCP IP. Maybe IP version 4 and IP version 6 might be some differences. Layer 4 is where we start talking about TCP and UDP. There's TCP and UDP is where we start dealing with port numbers. And TCP and UDP, we often see associated with that layer 4. This would also be a layer we start seeing firewalls show up. Firewalls tend to provide decision-making at really layer 3 and up, but a lot of them deal with port numbers. And so we often think about firewalls at layer 4, but firewalls work across much broader layers than that. Layers 5, 6, and 7 deal specifically with the way applications are working. Sometimes we tend to lump them together into, this is how apps work. But if you wanted to break them out, layer 5 deals with setting up the session information, being able to have an application communicate from one side to the other. Often you'll see tunneling protocols or connectivity protocols. Getting an application started would be happening at that OSI layer 5. OSI layer 6, the presentation layer, is getting the information ready to show you. We commonly look at encryption technologies as living in this layer, because there has to be something between the time that the application accepts data and the application showing it to you, and we have to decrypt or encrypt that data. This would be the layer that happens. And then layer 7 is the application itself. It's what we see when we look at the app. It's the browser. It's the file transfer program. It's whatever we happen to be using, we think of as being that layer 7. So if we were to break out our question, which was sorting the components from OSI layer from lowest to highest, let's start with OSI layer 1. That's our category 5 cable. Number of you, as I flip through the answers here, almost everybody got that category 5 cable as the first component from lowest to highest. Next up, OSI layer 2, that would be a switch. So if you put switch as the second option in your list, you would have gotten that one absolutely right. Third on your list would be router. That's certainly the one that fits best into OSI layer 3. Firewall's a tough one, because a lot of people will use a firewall as a router as well. a firewall could technically fit onto layer 3. So if you put firewall in layer 3, I might give you half credit, but I think most people think of a firewall as something that is at layer 4 and higher. Most traditionally, a firewall is at layer 4. The most modern firewall is obviously a layer 7. So if you put that anywhere between 4 and 7, I think you probably have a pretty good idea of where that might fit. Content filters almost exclusively at layer 7. It's something that is determining, for instance, whether you can visit a URL. And a URL is something that happens really in a browser. Browser is a layer 7 component, so that makes sense. So if you put a router and a firewall both at layer 3, I could give you half credit on that one. I think the best place for a router, though, is layer 3, and the best place for the firewall is probably layer 4 and up. The most traditional firewalls we think of as something that allow or disallow a particular port number from passing. But it's very difficult sometimes to put things into a specific OSI layer. And this is a good example of how sometimes it's hard to really figure out where something might go. And hopefully it's given you an idea when you're trying to put these in order. I could put these in multiple layers, and that's okay. If you did, and we talked about, for instance, a firewall could be between 3 and 7, you kind of get credit for that one because that is really where firewalls sit today. Makes sense to be able to have that there. I think your most modern firewalls these days are layer 7 devices. They are devices that can really see the applications and be able to allow or disallow traffic based on that. So if you went through this list and you were able to put together exactly what happened where and put them in order from OSI's lowest layer to the highest layer, you did a pretty good job with that one. This was a difficult question. Folks in the chat room going, that's a hard one. But I always want to start you off with something that might be realistic on your exam. You might get a performance-based question. You will get a performance-based question first thing on your exam. No doubt. You will get something immediately. You'll probably get multiple performance-based questions on your exam. I traditionally have told people, and I still stick with this, is that I think you should flag the performance-based questions, skip over them, and go right to the multiple choice, go through all of the multiple choice questions, and then come back to the performance-based questions. I think that is a much better way to do it because I think the multiple choice helps you get into the groove of the test taking. It might jog your memory on different topics, and then you can come back to the performance-based questions and spend as little time as possible. Really optimize that time that you have on those more difficult questions and getting through it. I think that's one thing that does come in handy whenever you're working through those. So let's go to the next question. I think you guys did really well with that one. If you answered, my list was a Cat5 cable, switch, router, firewall, content filter. So that's how I would have answered them if I was going to put those together. Let's jump now into a different question. I have another one for you. Let me flip it on my screen. So you should see the question change in your Socrative to which of these would be the best reason for enabling DHCP snooping? It's not snooping, snooping. There should be a good reason for enabling DHCP snooping, but what is it? Fortunately, this is not a multiple choice question for you. I have some possible answers, and they are restrict outbound web browsing traffic, require authentication before allowing network access, block all unauthorized DHCP servers, enable static IP addressing for all devices, and or prevent the transfer of PII. This is not an and question. This is an or question. It's one of those. It's either an A, B, C, D, or E. Remember, don't answer in the chat room. You should, of course, answer in Socrative.com. You should go to Socrative.com to the room name Professor Messer. There it is right there, if you're not there already, and be able to answer this question about the best reason for enabling DHCP snooping. Snooping. You've got your mind on your network and your network on your mind. It's DHCP snooping. There is a lot you need to know about these topics on the Network Plus exam. I try to ask you questions about how these technologies are applied. It's not enough just to know the definition of DHCP snooping or understand what DHCP means. You need to understand how to apply it. I very often say that you need hands-on when you sit for these exams because they're not going to ask you the definition of something. They're going to ask you to apply it to a problem, to apply it to an issue that you've run into, to resolve a problem that you see on the network. This is a really good example of this, the best reason for enabling DHCP snooping. Let's see how we did. If we click how we did, 62% of us said block all unauthorized DHCP servers, but double digits, although way back at 20%, said require authentication before allowing network access. Almost double digits for enable static IP addressing for all devices, and then way down there at 6% is restrict outbound web browsing traffic and prevent the transfer of PII. So let's talk about DHCP snooping, what this means for you. DHCP snooping is something you generally configure as a feature of a switch. It's a capability that you would have to look at the functionality of your switch, look at the technical specifications to see if your switch supports DHCP snooping. What this effectively does is you're able to really track what's happening with the DHCP communication on your network. DHCP communication is a good way to, for one way, really mess up the network configuration, the DHCP part of it, have somebody just turn on a DHCP server that you didn't authorize and suddenly it's giving out IP addresses. That's a bad thing to happen. You could also have somebody pretend to be the DHCP server maliciously to gain access to your network. So that's something to think about as well. What the DHCP snooping functionality of your switch tends to do is identify things that are trusted. So it can trust routers and switches and other DHCP servers. And then it puts into a different category things it doesn't trust to be able to send out DHCP notices, like servers, other computers, unauthorized DHCP servers. Certainly something that you don't want to have happen. What it will wait for is to see when a DHCP conversation occurs. These broadcasts go out of a device looking for a DHCP address and then seeing the responses that come back. And if the responses that come back are from an authorized device, then the response can continue. But if it comes from an untrusted device, then we can put it into its own category and make sure that it's not able to communicate out on the network. Filters out the IP address and DHCP communication coming from those devices and prevents anyone from misusing or sending out information if you are not a truly authorized DHCP server. So if we go back to the list of these, we can see 62% of you said block all unauthorized DHCP servers. That's your right answer. The 62% of you are right on the money. Requiring authentication before allowing network access is a function of 802.1x. So that is not related to DHCP snooping. That's a completely different feature that is not associated with DHCP snooping at all. 10% said enable static IP addressing for all devices. That would effectively be turning off DHCP. You would be statically addressing all of your devices. Restrict outbound web browsing traffic. That's a URL filter. And preventing the transfer of PII. That's something that usually best fits into the prevention of data access on your network. So if you have a DLP server, data loss prevention, whether it's something that is a server watching network traffic or DLP that's on a server or on a device, there's a lot of different ways to provide DLP, but that's what I would say, preventing the transfer of PII, which is your personally identifiable information. That's a completely different technology as well than DHCP snooping. So if you answered C, block all unauthorized DHCP servers, you would be absolutely correct. So someone said, can someone use a DHCP server to gain access to another network? Perhaps not gaining access to a network, but certainly providing other IP addresses on the network can create a denial of service situation and prevent the actual devices that should be working properly from being able to communicate on a network that normally they should be working on just fine. So you want to prevent that in any case. It could also help facilitate a man-in-the-middle attack, and you don't want that occurring either. So a lot of bad reasons that a person would set up their own DHCP server and start handing out IP addresses in your environment. That's something you want to prevent. One of the best ways to do that is through DHCP snooping. Let's do another question. Yeah, it is definitely a way to create chaos. No question about that. Here's one. You're troubleshooting a network connection. You notice that the link lights are not on on this network connection. This would be the link lights that are on the Ethernet adapter that you're working on. Which of these would be the most likely cause of this issue? What would be the most likely cause of link lights not being turned on that device? Would it be that you're using an incorrect username and password? Could it be that the Ethernet cable is wired incorrectly? Might it be that the duplex is set incorrectly? Perhaps it's the incorrect VLAN is configured on the switch, or perhaps that it is the IP address of the device is incorrect. One of these would be the most likely cause of this issue. This is one of those special terms they use on the Network Plus exam, the most likely reason. I guess the idea is that you could see that multiples of these answers could be the reason, but they're really asking you for the most likely reason for this issue. In this particular question, I don't think there is one that is that you could really say is less likely. I could say, what is the cause of this issue for this one? Because I think there's really only one answer here that really makes sense. If you know what you think the answer might be, you can go to Socrative.com. You can go to the room name, Professor Messer. You can answer this question. Now, if you're watching this in the replay, you can't do any of that. I apologize if you're watching this in the replay, but you're only able to answer live when we perform this live event in real time. You can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and find out when we do these live events. And you are able to sit there and answer questions there and figure out all of those pieces. Yeah, the ones I hate are the all of the above, none of the above, A and B, A and C. I don't think the ones that are on the exam really go into that level of detail, although I could see a none of the above might show up from time to time. There are some questions on the exam you may be asked to answer multiple questions. I don't ask that here because the front end that I use on Socrative doesn't really enable multiple questions very well. It actually does enable it, but you can't tag them very well. I should do more of those, though. I think it would be fun to do some that have multiple answers in the list. Well, let's see how we did with this one. How do we do? Well, 83% of you said the cable's a problem. That's why you're not getting a link light. But double digits, 10% of you said the incorrect VLAN is configured on the switch. Nobody said you're using the incorrect username and password. 3% said the duplex is set incorrectly, and 4% said the IP address of the device is incorrect. So let's think about these interface configurations and why those link lights would be on. There's the link lights. There's link lights usually not just on your Ethernet adapter itself. These link lights could also be on the switch. If you're trying to troubleshoot a problem and you notice there's no light on that link, really the only reason you would not have a signal going from one end to the other is that the signal's not getting from one end to the other for some reason. It's either something where a switch interface or an interface on a device has been administratively turned off. That could have been one of the reasons. But that wasn't one of the options I gave you. There's no, the interface has been disabled. That's not on this list. So that could not be it. Could it be that the only other thing I can think of in this case is that we aren't getting a signal from one side to the other, so the problem's with the cable or the fiber. If we know that the interfaces are set up properly, even if they are misconfigured in certain ways, we know that we would not get a link light. The only other issue here that I could see the link light not showing up is not just no connection, but you might have the speed hard-coded. Normally in Ethernet, we set these to auto-configure. So it really doesn't matter what you plug in on both sides. It will figure out the best speed and everything will go back and forth. But if you configured one side to say you're only going to work at gigabit Ethernet, and you configure another side to say you're only going to work at 100 megabit Ethernet, those two speeds, any two different speeds on Ethernet are not compatible with each other, and it will not be able to bring up any type of link light to be able to have that there. So that's one of those things that is another reason a link light might not turn on, is that you've hard-coded different speeds. But if you've set it up for problems with a duplex, you will notice that for a duplex, you'll get a link light. You'll have a connection that'll even work. You can ping from one end to the other, but you may notice that you're getting some drop packets. You'll notice that the speed is not what you would expect. So that's one of those cases where setting up different duplex settings on both sides, still allow a link site, the link light, to be able to work properly across those. And VLAN configurations also allow a link light, but you're not going to be able to communicate very well because you're probably configured for a different VLAN on your device. Maybe you've got a different IP address, or you've been placed onto a different network now that doesn't have access to the things that you need access to because you've been put on a different VLAN, but your link light will still remain on. So if we look at all the different options, using an incorrect username and password, the 0% of you that answered this, you were absolutely right not to answer it. Definitely not a username and password issue. 9% said the incorrect VLAN's configured on the switch. We know now that even an incorrect VLAN configuration still allows us a link light, which indicates some type of issue associated with the with configuring the settings on the switch. Has nothing to do with the signal. The signal still passes. 3% said IP address of the device is incorrect. Nope, we get a link light there. Duplex is set incorrectly. Nope, we get a link light there as well. The only real answer here, you guys answered this one just fine, is that the Ethernet cable is just wired incorrectly. We're not getting a link light. The 85% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that. There's so much you have to know on the Network Plus exam. There's so many different topics. It is a very broad exam. It's a set of technologies that probably is the most number of acronyms that you'll get on any of the most popular CompTIA exams. So when you start working through this, you'll notice there's a lot that you need to go through and understand. Well, if you go through every single one of my videos, I highly recommend for you to take your own notes. But some of you don't have time to go through every video. Maybe you don't have time to take all the notes. Maybe you prefer I took the notes for you. So I did. I created a series of course notes that really break down everything that's important for my exam videos, everything from subnetting protocols, cabling, fiber, encryption, wireless technologies, proxies, everything that I take, that's all the graphics, all of the charts, all of the tables, all of the images that are important. I go through and absolutely show you these. Here's an example. I've got the course notes up right here. It's a PDF file, so it's easy to get and put on all of your different devices, so you can take it with you wherever you go. And all of these important topics are here, ready to show you in the course notes. It's one of those things where if you start trying to do all of this yourself, you'll notice there are pages. There are 15 pages of these course notes. They are huge. So maybe this is something that you might want to be able to use for your exam. They make a great study guide once you have finished reading your book, you finish watching the videos, you need something to help you memorize these important topics. Might be something you might want to use. And you can find out more about this at professormesser.com/NPCN. They're priced at a very, very low $10, an immediate download. You can put it immediately onto your devices and be able to take these with you. Maybe the best thing you can take once you finish those books and videos to be able to understand the details of the Network Plus exam. And it does help support what we're doing here at Messer Studio. So I want to thank everybody for their ongoing support with that and for buying the Network Plus course notes. I've got another question for you. Let's load it up on this side. This one is a video daily double. Well, a picture daily double. Here is the image. What cable is this? What in the world is this? This is a fill in the blank question, by the way, so you can think of this as a performance-based question. I do not have multiple choices there to be able to do this. So you have to know, what are you looking at? So you can see on the screen, this is a cable map, we call it, where it shows the pins on one side of the cable and the pins on the other side of the cable. What is this cable? What would you use this cable for? How would you use this cable? And see if you happen to know what this cable is. Some of you know what it is. Some of you are making a guess. Some of you think you know what it is. Now I'm going to have people that are sending their answers and going, but wait, is it? What is that? Have there. This is not Microsoft Paint. Thank you very much, Torque. This is, I did this in this image, this very well-crafted, very technical wire map I created in OmniGraffle, which is the Mac OS version of, what is it, Visio on the Microsoft operating system. There is no Visio in Mac OS. And I use Mac OS for all of the stuff that I have. Well, not all the stuff I have here. If you're watching this on the stream, the video switching system I'm running right now is in Windows. The birdfeeder.live is Windows. The Professor Messer website is Linux. The audio system I'm using that's over here is Linux. It's an embedded Linux. And the computers I have in front of me are Mac OS, that is iOS. There's a lot going on here, operating system-wise. Well, it looks like it. I have to admit that it does look very rudimentary, but I intended it to look very simple. So if this happened to be one of those times where my skills and what I was trying to do fit perfectly, my very simple illustration skills and the need to illustrate something very simply, this was the best of both worlds. What cable is this? So some of you, let me tell you what you answered that was wrong. So some of you said some of you said straight through cable. It's not straight through cable. Some of you said twisted pair. We really don't know if that's twisted pair or not. There's nothing twisted there. It's a wire map. It could be a wire that is connecting. It could be barbed wire. We don't know. Could be one of those. Some of you said straight through cable. It's not a straight through cable, and we know that because pin 1 is not connecting to pin 1, pin 2 is not connecting to pin 2, pin 3 is not connecting to pin 3. If it was a straight through or a patch cable, all of the pins on one side would match the pins on the other side. But this is not. It's kind of different though. You'll notice that it's weird because 1 is connecting to 3, but 2 is connecting to 6. But 7 is connecting to 4. There doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason between all of these. It becomes a little bit more of a challenge to know what this is. But what this actually is used is twice there, is an Ethernet crossover cable. This happens to be one that is wired as a particular wiring scheme of EIA-TIA 568B, which is just designating what colors we're putting on pins 1 through 8. But the actual pinouts are an Ethernet crossover cable. This happens to be a crossover cable for gigabit Ethernet, by the way. For those of you that know about gigabit Ethernet, you have to be able to use all 8 wires, all 4 pairs on this for it to be able to work properly. If you are not using all 4 of those pairs, it will not run at gigabit Ethernet speeds. So you have to make sure that it is gig. It also works on 10 gig as well for crossover for all of those pairs as well. But you start to see all of these really start being used on 1000 megabit or gigabit Ethernet. It's not a 568A crossover cable because the colors I'm using are a little different. The answer is a crossover cable. Whether you're using this as an A or B doesn't matter as long as the pinouts are exactly the same. It's the colors that determine whether you call it A or B, 568A or 568B. Kind of an odd thing. All that 568A and 568B are really talking about in that respect from a color perspective is that's what it looks like, what the colors are. Now, there are many other aspects to the 568 standard that determine how to properly wire a cabling infrastructure. But the 568A and the 568B specifications are all about what color you paint the walls. They're all about do the walls, are they matching the furniture that I'm getting? It's all about the colors and what's there. It's not a rollover cable because a rollover cable completely flips what you have. So 1 goes to 8, 2 goes to 7, 3 goes to 6, and so on and so forth. It goes to the exact other side is a rollover cable. Rollover cables were or are commonly seen on many network infrastructure devices, primarily Cisco, but some others as well. These days, the Cisco devices tend to be more of a null modem connection, not really a rollover, or an Ethernet crossover if you're connecting directly to the Ethernet interface on that device. These Ethernet crossover cables are interesting because they are using all 8 of the wires. And what's interesting when you get into gigabit Ethernet is there's really no wires aren't dedicated to send and wires aren't dedicated to receive. There's actually a way that you can, not a way you can, it actually sends and receives on both at the same time and all the pairs at the same time. So it's kind of nice to be able to have that there. And have those, the Yoast cable is another name for the rollover cable, for those of you wondering. Yoast, Y-O-S-T, named after the person who, I guess, came up with it Fred Yost. I made that up. I don't know his name off the top of my head. We hardly call it that. It's not really Cisco's. Yoast and rollover are not specific to Cisco, but they're very common with Cisco. So we'll see those whenever you start working through them. That's a good one. So those of you, as I go through this list, you obviously don't see it on your side. A lot of you said crossover cable. Those of you said crossover, absolutely correct. For those of you who said gigabit crossover was even more correct. But I'll accept crossover cable. That's a pretty good answer. And most of you did well with that one. I think you got about 80% of you got that one right. That's how well you know your cabling. Well done with that one. That's one you really do need to know. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about standards. And I want to know specifically standards that support MU-MIMO. They support MU-MIMO. They do support. Which of these standards does support MU-MIMO? MU-MIMO. Yes, the MIMO becomes useful. Now you're about to understand why I'm asking about this particular kind of MIMO, which is the MU-MIMO, or MU-MIMO, depending on which Greek character you like. That is not the right view. This is the right view. There you go. There. So if you were to answer this, the answers would be one of these: 802.11a, 802.11b, 802.11g, 802.11n, and 802.11ac. So I really didn't give you much wiggle room there. Yeah, do not Google MU-MIMO. Don't do that. Just take a guess. What could it be? Take a guess, just like you're sitting for the exam and you need to guess it right now. Just take a stab at it. This is a pretty important technology as well. So it's one you need to know about, especially for the exam. It is in the exam objectives. This is one where I'm sort of asking you, again, that two-step question. You may know what MU-MIMO is, but then how do you apply it to an actual answer I have here? Because I'm not asking you what it is. I'm asking you where you find it. And maybe you happen to know what it is and being able to work through this. And I didn't leave you much room because I just put down every possible 802.11 standard. So you do have to know these as well and being able to work through those. Yes, Google is down until 1 o'clock. You can't use Google. It's offline. I know they take it offline just for my live event so that you can't Google these. They also take it down if you're watching this in the replay. So don't look at that either. It happens to know because, of course, you're watching the replay on YouTube. YouTube's owned by Google. See how that worked? It's really remarkable that I have that kind of pull. Let's see how we did with which of these standards supports MU-MIMO. Well, 68% said, I've never heard of this before, so it must be on the latest version of the standard, which is 802.11ac. This is one where I'm really asking for one question. There is only one question this really applies to. 25%, a quarter of you said 802.11n, and then hardly anybody said G, B, or A. Wouldn't it be great if it was, what's the lowest one, B? Or wouldn't it be great if it was B because only 1% said that? Right, you could use Bing. There's always an alternative, isn't there? Let's talk about MU-MIMO. This is part of the standards that are using 5 gigahertz communication for wireless communication. So that really fits into 802.11a, 802.11n, or 802.11ac. So we're already narrowing our focus where this might possibly fit. So we know it won't fit into B. We know it won't fit into G. So those of you that answered B or C, sorry, you're definitely not right. But that was only 6% of you chose one of those two. You were taking a stab at it, and I can appreciate that. 802.11a used a method for communicating called DFS, Dynamic Frequency Selection. So this is one that that's not the right answer because that's not the type of communication modulation we're looking for. There's a type of multiplexing with 802.11n that uses OFDM, the orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. This is a way that these devices, which are a single access point, are still able to send information to multiple devices out there on the network, all seemingly simultaneously. Even though, how does it do that? Because there's only one signal, one radio signal that's going in and out, being able to do that. So even over this given bandwidth, it can send multiple streams of data to multiple devices simultaneously to be able to make that happen. When we looked into making things faster, you'll notice when 802.11n hit, suddenly we were able to really increase the speed of the network from what was below 100 megabits per second to hundreds of megabits per second. How were we able to do that? One of the major methods of being able to make that happen was MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as single user MIMO, SU-MIMO. That's single user because you're able to set up and have multiple receivers, or excuse me, one receiver and one antenna on a system, but you're able to send and receive multiple data streams from that one antenna. So it's really away from single user perspective. That's where that single antenna comes from. You were able to really send information back and forth to these multiple devices at very high rates of speed and have that one antenna effectively act and look like multiple senders and receivers, even though it really was one of them. Well, we took that to a very different level with 802.11ac, and we came up with multi-user MIMO, MU-MIMO, MU-MIMO. Multi-user MIMO, we could have 4 receivers on a single access point. Think of these, if you ever see these access points these days, they have like 8 antennas on them. Well, this is where we're really starting to use the multi-user MIMO. Think of it as having a single access point, but you're cutting it up into 4 pieces. You effectively might have 4 separate access points independently working in this one device, thanks to the technologies behind multi-user MIMO. It becomes really useful to be able to make that happen. So whenever you see anyone talking about MIMO, single user MIMO, they're really talking about 802.11n. But if we're talking about multi-user MIMO, we're really referring to the technologies built into 802.11ac. That's one of the reasons we're able to make things go so fast on those technologies. Now, if you wanted to set up some of these Network Plus configurations at your house and to be able to run through these labs, you could absolutely do it. You would need some switches, you would need some routers, you would need a way to set up and configure maybe communication across the internet. Maybe you'd have to get some other software to be able to run VPN technologies and be able to work through those. Or you could use some labs that have already been set up for you that cover so many different technologies. These are the GTS Learning Live Labs dealing with Network Plus. So whether you're trying to understand how protocols work like ARP and ICMP, I'm going to scroll down further, understanding the way network protocols, virtual machines, software as a service. Here's VPN server configuration, parts 1 and 2, troubleshooting internet connections and DNS settings. It's always the DNS, so that's a good one to know. Understanding common network vulnerabilities, network address translation, network-based malware, understanding how IPsec works. You can go right into the lab. I can just choose any one of these, and I've got these machines that are already starting up. I can power them on as if they were sitting right in front of me. This one has 5 machines as part of the lab. There's the lab diagram. It's kind of hard to see on my screen. I'll move it over so you can see it. So I've got a domain controller. I've got another Windows device. Here's Windows 8 and Windows 7 devices in my lab. And then it steps me through what to do first. You need to download and install Network Monitor. It shows you exactly what you should be clicking on to be able to make that happen. You click these things, you go to the tools, you'll be able to install it. And all it's doing is really setting up these virtual machines. These are full-blown Windows systems. You don't even have to follow the lab if you don't want to. You can mess around with the operating systems. You can try different things. And it's all done in a browser window. So it's very, very fast. It's all a remote desktop to the virtual machine that's out there in the world. So you'll notice you can start using these. So I can go to the desktop. There's the desktop. That's how fast it is. I bring up my browser. There's the browser. So you can see extremely fast because it's a remote desktop. You don't need any extra resources on your computer. You don't need extra software on your computer. There's nothing more to do. All the labs are right here in front of you. And there's a special price for you because you're watching this live event. If you go to professormesser.com/netlabs, you will get the special pricing for these. This also includes the Network Plus book from GTS Learning that I use to create these videos, and also comes with another 200 practice questions on this. This is a great way to be able to, at any time, pop open and run through some labs because it's all done in a browser and a special price. Instead of paying $169, you're only paying $109 for this because you're following this link specifically, professormesser.com/netlabs. I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for sponsoring what we do here and supporting you by giving you these special prices on the Net Labs. I use them all the time. I've used them in my videos. I use them when I need a screenshot of something. So you can use them for a lot of different purposes. It's something that might also, of course, help you finally get some of these hard to understand topics solidified. They're in your brain, and now you're ready to take your exam. So let's also do some other questions then. I want to thank folks, of course, at GTS Learning. They're great folks to work with, and I wouldn't support the products if I didn't like what they were doing, and I wouldn't support the products if I didn't like the people that were there. So I really like working with them. Let's do another question. Here's one that asks about spoofing. The question is, which of the following would be most likely to allow a workstation to spoof a switch? Spoof a switch? Wow, I'd love to spoof a switch. How could I do that? Well, you could do that by using one of these technologies. You could use trunking, lag, port auto configuration, 802.1q, or TACACS. One of these would be the most likely way to allow a workstation to spoof a switch. How could I do that? How? That'd be something, wouldn't it, to be spoofing a switch, being able to make that happen? And yet that is something that is a serious and significant security concern, and it's one of the things you need to know for the Network Plus exam, perhaps even more importantly. So let's see if you know the answer. If you do, go to Socrative.com to the room name Professor Messer, and you'd be able to answer this one as well. How could you actually spoof an actual switch? How could that happen? That is something, by the way, that you do not see happen very often, the spoofing of a switch. That's an unusual thing. But boy, could you imagine if you as a workstation could spoof a switch? That would be a significant security concern. So we don't want that to happen. So we want to be sure that we look for the technologies that might enable that. People are clicking different stuff now. Don't worry if you click two answers. You know what you want the answer to be. You know what you want the answer to be in here. So maybe that's how, maybe that was meant. Maybe you think you know what those are. So it's one of those things like, wait a second, this is in the exam objectives? It's absolutely in the exam objectives. Let's see how we did with this one. Which of the following would be most likely to allow a workstation to spoof a switch? We have no idea. Well, we sort of do. We have a tie for first, three-way tie for first. 32% said port auto configuration. Close behind, 27% said trunking, 21% said lag, 13% said TACACS, 9% said 802.1q. One of these would be the issue. Boy, spoofing a switch is a thing. There is a functionality in many switches that you can turn on that will allow the switch to automatically configure what's connecting to it. You might first think that this is a bad idea. In some environments, it's probably a horrible idea, but in some environments, it can be really, really useful. That way, if you're plugging in a switch to the other side, you can automatically set up trunking to work properly. And if this is an environment that's very dynamic, maybe that's something that is useful to you. If you're plugging in a laptop, it'll determine, oh, that's a laptop. Let me set up an access port. Let me set it up as if it is a device and put it on the proper VLAN. The problem is with this functionality, there's no real standard associated with it, and there's no authentication associated with it. There's no communication back and forth to say, I think you're a switch. You have to prove to me that you're a switch. Well, there's no proof. There's no authentication. There's no checking. There's no double checks. We'll just send a trunk negotiation back to you. Oh, you're sending me a trunk negotiation. You must be a switch. I'm going to set up a trunk and send that trunk. And suddenly now you're pretending to be a switch. With the right software and the right configurations on your device, you can now pretend to be a switch if that auto configuration is enabled. And that means that you can send and receive traffic to VLANs that perhaps you should not have access to. Probably not even perhaps. This is one that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So if you are a switch administrator, you probably want to turn off that automatic configuration for trunking that might allow communication to another device when really it's not supposed to send and receive information to the other device. Just generally a bad idea to have that running. So going back to the list that we have here, which of the following would be the most likely thing that would allow a workstation to spoof a switch? It is that port auto configuration. 33%, not the majority, but certainly the most number of people answered that one. You won the popular vote. Port auto configuration, 32%. It's not trunking is not the thing that is most likely to allow a workstation to spoof a switch. Many devices can be set to do trunking, but if the switch is not set to trunk, you're not able to trunk. So just by enabling trunking on your side doesn't allow you necessarily to be able to have the switch recognize that. The switch would have to be set up in this auto configuration mode to be able to do that. 20% lag is link aggregation. That's what that abbreviation stands for. Link aggregation is a way to connect multiple interfaces between switches and be able to use the increased bandwidth between those devices. That has nothing to do with switch spoofing. It's not your device is not pretending to be a switch when you use link aggregation. TACACS is a way to authenticate to a central database, very commonly used for logging into a switch or logging into a router. A lot of network administrators will use TACACS as their authentication method rather than authenticating, for instance, against an existing Active Directory database. They have a separate database, and he uses the TACACS protocol to be able to do that. And that the authentication process behind TACACS has nothing to do with spoofing a switch, however. And 802.1q is another word for trunking. So .1q. We sometimes refer to that. And of course, just like trunking was not the right answer, .1q is also not the right answer. In this case, the thing that is most likely, and there's your important words right there, most likely in that question, port auto configuration. That's the right answer for that one. Let's go through, and I think we got time for one more question. We're going to squeeze one in. A lot of you say we need to get through more questions. You're absolutely right. Let's get through one more on this one. Which of these would be the best choice for troubleshooting a mismatched MTU? A mismatched MTU. I do this all the time. Not all the time. I used to do this all the time because I used to be in a situation. I almost gave this one away. I used to be in a situation where I would need to troubleshoot a mismatched MTU. Used to do that a lot. Now, not so much. But it does come in handy when you're troubleshooting a mismatched MTU if you perform a trace route or you perform a TDR, not really perform, but use a TDR, use a looking glass, perform a ping, perform a dig. One of these would be the best choice for troubleshooting a mismatched MTU. This is another one of those questions, isn't it, where I'm asking you about a technology, but I'm not asking you what the mismatched MTU thing means. I'm asking you how to troubleshoot it. We're taking another step further in this question to be able to do that. See, I put a little bit of thought into these questions. A little bit of effort goes into creating these. Even though I was sick as a dog this week, I try to make it so that half of you get this one wrong. That's my idea in my mind. I want half of you to fail. Isn't that great? What? That's not healthy. That's not what someone should be doing. That is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make them hard enough that they're a challenge. And if you don't know the answer, I want to make it so that you're learning something when you get the answer wrong. If you get the answer, all these answers right, this was a waste of your time anyway. I shouldn't make them that easy. I need to make them difficult, so you really have to think through it. This really needs to be a process in your brain because you're going to need this process when you sit for the exam, for sure. No question. Let's see how we did with this one. Which of these would be the best choice for troubleshooting a mismatched MTU? And again, we're all over the place. 40% said trace route. 27%, that's a good second place, said ping. 14% at third place said TDR. 12% said dig. And only 8% said looking glass in those. So troubleshooting an MTU. An MTU. The MTU is the maximum transmission unit. This is used in IP to send traffic, send information from one side of the network to the other. Now, usually this is something that is configured once you start a communication with a device. It's something that when you start sending information back and forth, the MTU size is calculated, it's negotiated, and then information is sent back and forth. That doesn't always happen because of a number of things that are in place and filters in place, but it's something very commonly occurs. And usually when you've got this running, the MTU, the maximum MTU that you can send across a particular link from one side to the other rarely changes. Usually nobody's in the infrastructure changing what the maximum transmission unit might be. Usually it's a function of the way you're communicating. For example, if you're tunneling traffic, imagine you're sending the maximum amount of information through a network, but now you've got to put information on the front and the end of it so you can tunnel it. Well, wait a second, I already had the maximum, and now I'm making more than the maximum. That won't work. So I have to send a smaller amount so that I can then wrap the tunnel around it and send it on its way. So that's why you often see a troubleshooting of the MTU occur when you're dealing with tunneled connections, because you're having additional traffic, additional header and footers being stuck onto the information as it's being sent through the network. The problem, though, is sometimes your application will set a bit called a DF bit, a don't fragment bit, because normally if it's too big, IP will cut it up into smaller pieces so it can make it through the connection. But sometimes your application says, nope, can't fragment this. And if it can't fragment and it gets to a place where it can't fit through the size of the network, then it's just going to drop the information. And that's why we have to troubleshoot this. Usually we'll get an ICMP message back from whatever had to drop it that said, hey, I just want to send you an ICMP message back. This is the same protocol we use for ping, but it's used in a different way. It's used as a notification to say, I was sending some information that you sent, but the information I had to drop it because the MTU was too big. I couldn't fit it through this link, so I'm sending you back an ICMP notification. The problem is that many firewalls will filter ICMP. So you will not always get a response back. The information won't work. The connection won't work. I'm trying to send information to this tunnel, and it's not working. Why is it not working? I wonder if it's the MTU size. So how can I now figure out what the maximum MTU really is through this tunneled connection? And the easiest way to do this is with the ping command. Because with ping, normally we just use ping to see if a device is running. But you can also send a ping and put in a certain amount of payload within the information that you're pinging. So you can build a certain sized packet and send that out. The maximum size for ping, 1472, because when you stick all of the headers and the footers around that, it turns out to be 1500 bytes, which is the maximum size for Ethernet. So in Windows, for instance, here's the exam: ping -f -l length 1472, and then you'll send it to the end station you're sending it to. I just chose an IP address, but this would be the end station of the IP address that you're working with. So that's one very easy way. And what you would do if 1472 didn't work, let's try a lower number. Just keep trying lower numbers until it works. Boom, you just found the MTU, and then you can configure the MTU manually on your side so that it will always not send traffic that goes above that has a don't fragment bit so that everything makes it through the tunnel. Whew. Boy, the things you have to do just to send data through these tunnels that you've built. You set it up, it looks like it's working, then it isn't. Why isn't it working? And what you have to go through to troubleshoot. And interestingly enough, ping was the easiest way to do that. Ping, indeed, at 27% of you chose D ping. That is the correct answer, is the ping. Would not be a trace route, although there are options in trace route to change how much data you are sending. That is not what trace route's designed to do. So that probably is not the best choice for troubleshooting a mismatched MTU. A time domain reflectometer doesn't do any type of MTU communication, so it would not be a TDR. Looking Glass is good to see what a provider's network is set up for routing. You could also do some pings and trace routes from there, but you're not often going through a third party when you're using these tunnels. You might be going through your own network. So a Looking Glass probably not the best place to go to troubleshoot an MTU. And then dig, very similar to NS lookup. This is taking information like an IP address and determining what the name is based on what a domain name server is configured as. It could also do the reverse. You give it a name and it would give you an IP address, but that deals with domain name services. So it would not be dig either. It has nothing to do with MTUs. So it would not be dig. The correct answer, D, ping, is the correct answer. I thought ping was just used to see if something was up or down. No, we can use it for a lot of other things as well. Well, if you've looked through all of these and you've tried to figure out where is he getting all this from, I go directly to the CompTIA exam objectives. You can find these exam objectives if you go to professormesser.com/objectives. You can also find them by going to the Google machine and typing in CompTIA exam objectives. And of course, they're somewhere on the CompTIA website if you want to hunt around there to find those exam objectives. This is where you should start. This should be the first thing you get when you are starting to study for your exam. This should also be the last thing you reference before you're ready to book your exam, because this will tell you whether you are ready to take the exam or not. This will answer the questions for you that are, what do I need to know to be able to pass my exam? There is really no other manufacturer, no other exam certification exam provider out there that provides the level of detail that CompTIA does in these exam objectives, and you should take advantage of it. Cisco doesn't do this. Microsoft doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Nobody else does this. So go look at these exam objectives. They tell you everything you need to know for your exam. They are extremely detailed, and it should be the primary checklist that you use when you're going through and try to determine if you know what you need to know. Make sure you grab those. Probably the best tip that I could give you when you're ready to take your exam. Well, we do one of these study groups every month. So if you want to tune in next month in the live event, maybe you're watching this in the replay, you thought, man, I'd like to be there live. I'd like to answer these questions interactively. And you can do that. If this is after February the 8th, which is when our next Network Plus study group is, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar, where I list out all of the live events that we're doing. So you can easily find out exactly when the next live event is, and you'll be able to tell if I'm healthy enough to be able to do a live event, which is questionable now that we've gone through an hour of this. Well, of course, there's always something going on when a live event is not occurring. You can follow what we're doing at professormesser.com/Twitter/Instagram/Facebook/LinkedIn/ I don't know, just slash something. And you will find if we have something there, it will take you to that place. Don't forget about the course notes. That might be something that can really help you. And of course, every dollar goes back to supporting and keeping things running here at Messer Studios. You can find out information about that at professormesser.com/NPCN Network Plus Course Notes. Being able to get that. Oh, I didn't give a CEU. So by the way, if you're watching this particular video for continuing education credits, you almost missed it. You should be able to go through to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link. And on that Contact Us link, you should put in your name. You should give me your email address. And you should put in the special code word for this month, which is MTU, the maximum transmission unit. MTU is it. That's the one you should use to be able to get that. You send me that, and in about a week, sometimes faster, sometimes longer, I'm sending you back an email that is digitally signed by me that says, yes, you must have watched this whole thing because you happen to know that the special code word was MTU. You do not have to watch this live to get that continuing education. And you could be watching this on the replay. You go back and watch all of my videos on a replay. I think you can only collect 10, though, for a webinar-based CEU for CompTIA. Maybe you're using your CEUs for something else as well to be able to do that. My thanks again to the folks at GTS Learning. You can find out about their net labs at professormesser.com/netlabs to be able to do that. And of course, don't forget about the calendar link where you can really see what's going on here and when the next live event might be. Might be useful to have that there. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining me. If you're here live, you might want to stick around for the second hour. Heck, if you're here on the replay, you might want to stick around for the second hour. I will open up the phone lines, and I will keep talking for as long as my throat will allow me to talk. Thanks for joining us on the study group. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus live study group. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the reminder there at the end. I almost didn't give a continuing education unit credit. Name, special code word, secret key. That would have been bad. That'd be bad. Usually I can remember those things. This is not a good day to remember things. I'm telling you, not a good day for that. I am barely holding it together, people. It's I got that cold started. If you want, go back and watch the study group from last week. At the end, I'm talking like this. And then it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. It got bad here during the week. Mrs. Professor Messer was not happy. She was, though, keeping me well medicated and make sure I made it through. And today was pretty good, though. Today, we're on the way back. It sounds bad, but we are on the way back. Obviously, not creating any new video content these days because of the cold, but we're getting there. Let me open up the phone lines. Let me open up the Skype and call into the Skype and start this thing and get that going.
Thank you for calling.
And you're welcome for me calling. What do? I type a thing in that's right here. I type this.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
And still redundant. I need to change. I think I can change those prompts.
Welcome, host.
I think I can change those prompts. I'm not sure if I can or not. Well, there's the phone number. If you wanted to call in, you're more than welcome to. You can also put questions into the chat room. So if you don't like to call, you're not that kind of person, I'll answer questions in there as well. The phone number, 855-785-7545, a toll-free number here in the United States. If you're calling from outside the continental U.S., you can use Skype absolutely free. Free Skype minutes using the +1 country code 855-785-RJ45. That's 855-785-7545. That would be, I don't know what an evening out wire end is. I don't know. What is that? You tell me. I don't know. See the chat room? You're already coming up with great questions. I don't know. I love the questions where I can answer, I don't know. And then that's pretty much how it works for me. Those are the ones that work the best. The ones where I feign ignorance, and that usually works out okay. This is one pretty good. Oh, was it on a Network Plus practice question? Probably one I typed in wrong. See, don't ever discount the fact that I'm not able to spell properly. That's a good one. If you happen to run into one of those, you're wondering, what is that? Just send me a note. You can always send me the contact us link that's at the top of the bottom of the website. That goes to my phone. That goes right into my email. So if you ever wanted to send me anything and say, this didn't look right, I can usually fix them in a second. So it's not something that takes me long to repair when I've done something wrong. Because I'm good. I can do stuff wrong. Let me tell you, I can mess up the website real good, but I can fix it real good too. So that's one. So if you tell me, it's probably, I don't know what I was typing there. Evening out wire. You just send me a link to what that is. Send me the page. Oh, it's Exam Compass. Of course it's Exam Compass. I can't help with Exam Compass. I think they meant evening out wire ends, not evening out, evening. I think they meant taking the ends of a wire and making them even. What a badly. This is why you don't go over to Exam Compass. Instead, you go to professormesser.com/popquiz, where you take 200 free questions that are there and being able to do that. Although it sounds like something I could absolutely type in. I'm just telling you. Now, usually when you go to the questions that we have on our pop quiz on the Professor Messer website, I've already built in multiple people looking at them. So hopefully I haven't missed anything, but sometimes they do skip through. They slip through. And being able to do that. Let's go to 571 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Are you there, caller? Caller. Caller, do I have you turned on? Oh, wait. Caller, are you there? Oh, yeah, I'm in the Skype. Are you there, caller? I don't hear anything. I'm going to put you back in the queue, caller. It could be on my side. It can absolutely be on my side. We're going to try a different call, although I just heard this. We obviously heard Skype when it was calling in. So we'll try a different one. Let's go to 786. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, it's working. Thank you so much for calling. What can we do for you?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for whatever you're doing, helping us.
I think that describes it pretty well. Whatever I'm doing, I will accept your thanks.
So I had a quick question. There was a question that you had earlier, and it was about trunking, and I believe that's one of the switch features. And I was going through the book, and in chapter 3, it had a whole section of switch features. which had spanning tree protocol,
Yep.
trunking,
Sure.
ISL and 802.1q,
Yep.
port mirroring. I was having a hard time understanding these. If you could just briefly go over these few, that would be great.
That you're asking for quite a bit. I will very briefly go through them because they are important ones to know for the
Thank
exam, especially for Network Plus and being able to have them here. With trunking, I think I probably even have a better picture of this that I'm going to bring up. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here on the phone and go through what some of these trunking things are really referring to. You use trunking whenever you have more than one switch. You're trying to get things running on a switch. So I've got a good example of this that you obviously won't see it on the screen where you are. But this is where you would use trunking. You may also see trunking referred to as ISL. You'll see it referred to as ISL and 802.1q. You just mentioned both of those. ISL is inter-switch link. It's a protocol that Cisco came up with before there was a standard way to trunk. Cisco was really good at doing this, by the way, is they just make, if it wasn't out there already, they just make it up. And they made up a way to make this work. You never see ISL being used anymore. Now that the standard for trunking is out, which is 802.1q, that's what you really see people configuring. If you see anybody with a switch that even still does ISL, it has a lot of dust on the top of it. Nobody's doing that anymore. Use trunking when you've got two switches and you've got multiple VLANs on both switches, but you need people to communicate back and forth between each other. The example I have here is I have a VLAN 100 and a VLAN 200 on both of these switches, and you can see some devices on the switch are connected to VLAN 100 and some devices on the switch are connected to VLAN 200. But as you can see, these two switches, they're two separate devices. They don't talk to each other. They aren't communicating with each other on here. So we need some way to connect these switches together but still allow the VLANs to be these separate entities on both switches. One of the things you could do is you could get two cables. In this example, you get two cables. You could get a blue cable for a VLAN 200 and connect a cable between switches for that. And then you could get another cable and connect it between switches and run VLAN 100 over that one. So that's one way to do it. But imagine if you had 10 VLANs on a switch. Well, then you'd have to run 10 cables between switches. This is getting ridiculous. It doesn't scale very well. Although functionally that would work, it's not one that you ever see anyone using because you're taking up so many interfaces on a switch. And the interfaces on a switch, that's money. That's cost. It costs. Every interface on that switch has a cost associated with it. And I mean cost like a dollar value to be able to use that. So you don't want to use more interfaces than you have to. And that's why we came up with trunking. You can configure a single interface on that switch as a trunked interface and tell the two switches, I'm going to send multiple VLANs between these two switches across this one wire or this one fiber. And we're going to use we could put 10 VLANs across that interface. We could put 1,000. We could put up to 4,094 VLANs, which would be the maximum number you could possibly do ever with VLANing, and send it across those interfaces. That becomes pretty useful to have that functionality there. So when people are thinking about how do I use trunking, how does that fit into what you're doing with those trunked answers, that's what we're talking about from trunking. And if you ever see anybody talking about ISL, that's what they're referring to as well, is being able to use all of those things and being able to send the information between the trunks and have them work that way. It's one of the most popular switch technologies you will run into in an organization. It is one that I guess in everybody's environment where you're using multiple VLANs, it's one of the most common things you'll run into.
Okay, so it's just trunking and ISL that we need to be looking out for in the exam.
Those are certainly two of the trunking protocols that are in use. You will commonly see 802.1q and ISL. Those are the two protocols that these switches use to be able to send information back and forth. The one most commonly used is 802.1q. For some reason, people still talk about ISL. Nobody's used ISL in a long time. I doubt you're going to see anybody mention that on the exam. I don't recall seeing that On the exam objectives, I don't think it's there. Maybe it's in the set of acronyms, but I don't remember seeing in the primary part of the exam objectives.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Well, then that was it.
Good luck on your exam.
Thank you.
There were other things he was talking about too. A spanning tree protocol was one that he referred to. We didn't have time to really go through the details of spanning tree there. But that's certainly one that I recommend you, of course, know about as well, because that is on your CompTIA exam objectives as well. Let's go back to the phones. Thanks for holding. 352 area code. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. What's the difference between VLAN and a subnet? And there's a VLAN and a subnet.
That is a question that tends to come up very often in our chat room, because there are some environments that you will run into where it doesn't really follow the standard. What you'll find in most places, in most environments, in fact, the best practice is to have the VLAN and an IP subnet will effectively be the same thing. Now they are functionally, they are technically two different things. A VLAN is a broadcast domain. At its most simple, most functional description, a VLAN is a layer 2 broadcast domain. That's it. There's really nothing more associated with that. Obviously, an IP subnet is a way to separate layer 3 networks. So we're talking about two different OSI models when we talk about whether it's a VLAN or whether it's an IP subnet. Now, when we start using them on a network, the best practice is to have a single IP subnet for a single VLAN. That is the way that really most people should be setting up their networks. You will find some environments that will put multiple different IP subnets on the same VLAN, or they will do the other part. They will have multiple VLAN numbers, but have different IP what a mess that is. It's actually much more of a mess. That's a misconfiguration in my mind. But one that I've seen people use before is they will have multiple IP subnets on a single VLAN. So I have a VLAN 10, and they'll have multiple IP subnets on that VLAN 10, which kind of defeats the purpose in many ways of using VLAN technology to separate out different parts of the network. I could see people doing that if they were in a transition period between subnets. They're changing their IP addressing scheme. I could see doing that. Some people are doing that in a production network. Not a best practice and not recommended. But from a common sense perspective, from the way you think about networking, you can think about a VLAN and an IP subnet as having a one-to-one relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Great. That I think is probably best practice too. So if you're planning a network, if you're designing a network, if you're building a network in a lab and you've built out a VLAN, put a single IP subnet on that VLAN. If you build out a different numbered VLAN, you should be building out a different IP subnet to go into that.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. There's that is one where, and we've talked about this in our chat room too, because I've seen multiple environments where people will put multiple IP subnets on the same VLAN. And it's just, I understand why they're doing it. I just don't agree that they should be doing it that way. The way that people work with those VLANs, probably not a good idea in being able to do that way. There's not a lot on the CompTIA exam about VLANs. There's a section on VLAN. There's a video section I do for VLANs. It does not go into a lot of detail. I don't think they require you to set up a VLAN and be able to get that there. So it's not something you have to worry about so much. That's one where you do have to understand the idea behind it though. So if you understand why you're building out a trunk, for instance, and you're trunking VLANs between these, and the reason you put the VLANs there to begin with, I think that's a good idea. That's a good idea to be able to do it that way. So in the chat room, somebody asks the question, does IPv6 need NAT? Does it need NAT? Well, I guess the need part is really the question. Let's talk about why we use NAT for the most part today. There's a number of different reasons we use network address translation on our IPv4 networks, and probably one of the most common uses of NAT is what many manufacturers call PAT, port address translation, or they're calling it a source NAT, where you're changing the source IP address, because you've got now, we're using NAT on many environments as a way to separate out the public IP address side from the private IP addresses that we have inside of our network. And the address translation is translating from our private IP into a public IP that can be used across the internet, and then reversing the process when the conversation replies back to you. That's a very common way to do this. But we use NAT for so many different things. We use NAT as a way to translate and provide services to the outside, to a server that might be on the inside of our network. So we perform a translation so that people who are on the public internet can access that private device. We perform NAT if we're connecting multiple networks together. Let's say you're connecting to a third-party company, and that third-party company uses exactly the same IP addressing scheme as you do. They use a 10 dot network. There's duplicated networks between those two. So what companies will often do is perform a network address translation on both sides, or one of those sides, so that they're able to communicate back and forth without there being a conflict in your routing tables. So there's a lot of reasons to use NAT. Now, the most common reason I mentioned earlier was to do that port address translation, or be able to communicate from a private IPNS network scheme out to a public. But with IP version 6, although there are some privatized schemes with IP version 6, we don't really have to use those anymore. There are so many addresses available, so many subnets available, that everybody can effectively have an address that is public to the world. It's a public IP, although technically it doesn't have to communicate out to the public internet. So we don't necessarily even have to worry about network address translation anymore. It's one of the advantages of using an IP addressing scheme with IPv6, that everybody can have something unique. Every server, every user, every device has a different IP address, so that need to be able to translate just to be able to communicate across the internet disappears completely. And we don't have to use network address translation for that. Some people in the past have felt that network address translation is a security feature. Network address translation has nothing to do with security. That is not a security feature at all. That is not anything dealing with security. Do not put network address translation and security in the same association. It is not. It is a way to do addressing at an IP address level. The part that allows or disallows or provides security for communication is your firewall. That is what is providing security for IPv4. It's what's going to provide you security for IPv6. It's what's going to provide you security whether you're natting or not. So that is the real key, is to make sure that you have a firewall in place to provide the security, because network address translation is not a security mechanism. It was never designed to be a security mechanism. It doesn't work as a security mechanism. So that is not something you should lump together. Many people do, and it's a bad idea because it has nothing to do with each other. It's your firewall that's going to protect you. So generally, no, you're not going to NAT if you do IPv6. So there you go. So in my video, the first question. So if you roll back an hour and 30 minutes, first question in the chat room, they're asking, so what did I answer that one? My answer would have been, if you look at the most common uses in the OSI model, my answer would have been a cable, but a category 5 cable, the switch, the router, the firewall, which I'm putting in OSI layer 4 because of port numbers, and then content filter. But as I mentioned today, your firewalls are recognizing applications and are allowing and disallowing functions of applications. For example, modern firewalls today can allow you to browse Twitter, but prevent you from posting to Twitter. It's the same port number, it's the same application, but the firewall's smart enough to know the differences in those two things and is able to allow or disallow that functionality. That's really layer 7. So I said that if you stuck a firewall in layer 7, you put firewall and content filter. In fact, many firewalls these days are also content filters. They'll do URL filtering. So you might even want to combine those two. So I said content filter and firewall. Yeah, if you put it in layer 7, I wouldn't count off for that. But I generally, and I think most people generally think of a firewall as a layer 4 is where it sort of starts to work. And that's why people will often put it at layer 4. But I absolutely understand if you put it somewhere else, because firewalls do so much more these days. We can't afford to think of them as just a port filter anymore. They are devices that provide much more than simple TCP or UDP port filtering. Makes perfect sense for that. So that's why I put them in that order, and being able to use them that way it does come in handy to be able to put things in those orders. If you're sitting down with someone who is a firewall vendor, their router vendor, their switch vendor, their content filtering vendor, and you ask them, how does this work? They will use OSI layer terms to describe the functionality of the device. Well, you could use this in a layer 3 mode, and then you could connect it out here. Well, if you don't understand what they're saying when they say use it as a layer 3 in a layer 3 mode, they're effectively saying you're going to route with this. You're going to use this as a route, but they're not going to call it a router, because a router is a thing. It's a different thing. I know it's an odd nuance, but the vendors who are trying to sell these technologies don't want you to put them in a category of this is a router. Even it might be a great router, but it's so much more than a router. It's a content filter. It's a firewall. It does different things. So you don't want to be caught not knowing, oh, it works in layer 3 mode. You can also configure it in layer 2 mode. You can also configure it as a layer 1, kind of a virtual wire on the network too. So if you didn't have an understanding of the differences in that OSI layer 3, OSI layer 2, and OSI layer 1, you might have a single firewall that can connect to the network in 3 different OSI layers simultaneously, because many of these firewalls have multiple interfaces on them. They might be using some interfaces in layer 1, some interfaces in layer 2, and some interfaces in layer 3 all simultaneously. Now, that's not a shocking thing. We've had what they call layer 3 switches forever, for years and years and years and years. People still get messed up on the term layer 3 switch. I, of course, prefer the term layer 2 router. I think that's a much better way to describe it, which really messes up people. A content filter is not necessarily a proxy. A proxy is a network device that, when you're asking for a Google search, for instance, it intercepts that communication, sits in the middle, looks at what you asked, says, oh, you do a Google search for? Let me do that for you. Performs the Google search for you, brings the information back, puts it as a middle ground, looks at the answer, goes, okay, I have the answer for you, and then provides you with the answer. It doesn't necessarily have to filter anything. It could just be a proxy. Now, the reason we have the proxy in place most of the time is to provide some level of security. Otherwise, why would we be doing this? So really, we're relying on the proxy to look at the communication that came back from Google, make sure there's nothing malicious inside of it. Look at the request that you're making out to Google, make sure the request itself isn't something that you're not allowed to request. Some employers don't allow you to visit certain websites. No, you can't go to eBay. You can't go to a vacation website, a travel website. You can't go to a website that deals with a particular topic. And so the proxy may be providing a level of content filtering, but a content filter and a proxy aren't the same thing. The proxy is the communication process. The content filtering is what it is doing in the process of doing that. So that's a big difference when you're working through those. Can a wireless repeater get gigabit speeds or close to it? Well, these days with 802.11 AC, you can absolutely get very, very high-speed wireless on those. Now, a wireless repeater is a different thing than just a wireless access point. You're probably going to get close to gig speeds in its best possible environment with a wireless repeater, because a wireless repeater is something that sits in the middle of 2 wireless access points. So it receives communication from one, then has to stop and then send it on ideally different frequencies to the other access point. So it kind of cuts the bandwidth in half, if you want to think of it that way, and being able to work that way, because it can't send and receive to both of those simultaneously because it would overload the antennas, the frequencies that are there. A lot of the newer repeaters work a little bit better than that, but that's a very simplistic way to describe that functionality. There is, and wireless repeating, don't do it if you can get away with it. Just run a wire and connect up an access point on the other side. Wireless repeating just adds another level of complexity. It works. I've run wireless repeaters in certain environments, but speed is not why you would be running it. If you're trying to get gigabit speeds and you're setting up a wireless network to do this, you're probably not doing it right. That's probably not the right technology. Now, I understand, of course, that in some environments you don't have a choice. You just have to go with what you got. You can't run a wire. You can't run a fiber. You have to run what's there. So I get it in having that there. All right, I've refreshed my screen so I can actually see things on my side. Let's go to the 210 area code. Are you there, caller?
Hi, this is Latrinda.
Hey, Latrinda, thanks for calling again.
Oh, thanks for having me again, and thanks for remembering me. Hey, I got most of my ports memorized, but I'm having trouble visualizing exactly what a port is.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like something for like those operators, but I know that can't be since there's thousands of them. What exactly is a port?
Well, first we have to make sure we both understand what we're talking about when we say a port, because we use the term port in networking to mean different things. Generally, it could mean a physical interface on a device, like a port on a switch, or it could mean a TCP or UDP layer 4 port. Which one specifically are you referring to?
Yeah, I think like the list we have to memorize for the test.
Yes.
Like, like FTP is something I forgot already, and HTTP is 80, and
Yep.
HTTPS is 443. All of those can't be physical, right? I mean, you can't have like 2,000 physical ports.
They're not.
Or can you?
I think of ports as people that live in my house. So I think of it because in my house, I've got a certain address at my house, and all of the mail that comes to my house comes to that address. But obviously in my house, there's more people than just me. I've got myself, I've got Mrs. Professor Messer, I've got 3 kids, I've got 4 dogs. I've got a lot of people that are here in the house. But the mail that comes to my house is not just addressed to the house. There's obviously a name on that piece of mail. And the mail either has my name on it, it has my wife's name on it, or it has the name of one of my kids. Usually mail doesn't come to the dogs, but I guess it could. And I think of the name that's on the mail as the port number. Very similar, if we're sending traffic to a server, that server has an IP address. That IP address very similar to the address of my house. But if I'm sending web traffic to a server, how does it know where to route that web traffic? Well, I stick the name of the user on it, which in this particular case is the TCP port number. And I say, if I'm going to send this to this server, and by the way, server, I need you to send this on to port 80. So, oh yeah, port 80 lives here. So let me hand that off to port 80, and port 80 will handle whatever it is. And if port 80 needs to send mail back out, I'll send it back out this way too. It's a very common way to set up on a server. Many people can live there. A DHCP server can live there. An FTP server can live there. A web server can live there. And the port number is just a way to address that piece of mail or address that packet so that ultimately it gets to the right place inside of that server.
Oh, okay. So could I think of it like a sub IP address?
In many ways, that's exactly what it is. It's kind of taking the IP address and cutting it up into smaller pieces that are addressable so I can send web traffic to the right place inside of that machine.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. There's so much to memorize too. Now, of course, there is a list of the port numbers that you need to memorize for your exam. I have people that will show up on my website and they'll show me a page that has 150 port numbers on it. And they go, I've spent weeks trying to memorize this. Yeah, but you only need to memorize like 25. There's a list in the CompTIA exam objectives. Just memorize those. Do not memorize a page of port numbers. Memorize just the ones that are in the exam objectives. And you will save so much time. You will be so much happier that you do not have to go through and memorize all of those hundreds of port numbers. It's all in the exam objectives. Stick to the exam objectives. Don't deviate from the exam objectives. You don't have to know more than what's there. It's always nice to know more than what's there, but for the exam, you don't have to know more than what's there. And make sure you cover every one of those objectives. Everything that's listed there. Don't miss any of that. Don't forget to study a certain topic. If it's in the exam objectives, they can absolutely ask on the exam. And it's one of those things where they're telling you everything that could possibly be asked of you. And it's a pretty finite group of topics. So it's very clear if you go look at the exam objectives exactly what you need to know. It's one of the best study tools you will have for this exam. I got to tell you, I don't even understand why they do it. They really tell you everything you need to know. I'm so happy they do, because when I build my videos, I build them word for word with the topics that are listed in there. I wonder if I have my Network Plus exam objectives here. Let me pull up my list. I think I still have the ones that I used when I created my videos. So in fact, if you see them, these are the ones I used. Yeah. So as I was going through my exam objectives, I was highlighting different things. I was identifying, oh, this is new on the exam. Well, this is old in the exam. I have information on that. And so I was making notes as I went through it on the things. This one probably doesn't have all of my notes on it, but here's a good example. I would look at a section and go, well, I need to cover this and I need to cover that. These are new topics. I need to add these. Some of these I want to put in one video. Some of these I want to put in another. I'll color code out what I need to do. Like routing metrics, I think I put it all in one section or one video. Maybe I put route aggregation and route redistribution in the same video because I colored them the same. I don't remember. But I used these exam objectives, look how detailed they are, to really be able to put the proper information into the videos. So you should do the same thing for your studies. You will find books, websites, sample exams that will ask you questions that have nothing to do with the topics on these exam objectives. They're wasting your time. They are completely off topic. And although CompTIA tells you in the exam objectives, we could ask you anything. We can go off of this list and ask you anything we want, and it still would be fair game for the exam. They generally don't. If you know 100% of what's in these exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam. It's that simple. This is the list you should go with. So I'm always telling people that, because they'll show up on my website, they'll show up in the chat, and they will say, I just took my Network Plus exam and I didn't pass it. And they asked me a lot of questions about topics I was not expecting, and they'll name off some of the topics, which they probably shouldn't do because it's a violation of the Canada agreement, but they did it anyway. And I said, well, those are in the exam objectives. Those are pretty well documented that they could ask you that. And they say, what are the exam objectives? I don't know what you're talking about. So we have to redirect, like, you need to start here. Use this as your list. Make sure you take advantage of that. It's one of the best things you could do, really, and have that in there and have that piece available. So if we look at, there are some, by the way, in the chat room, people are mentioning this. There are some wireless repeaters that you could get. Generally, these are not wireless repeaters for the consumer market. There are some wireless repeaters that don't cut bandwidth in half. They use different frequencies on both sides to speed things along. So to complicate things further, they use multiple frequencies, more opportunities for interference to be able to send that back and forth. It's one of the challenges in being able to use wireless repeaters. I guess that's why I don't. Now, if your only choice is to use a wireless repeater, I get it. And absolutely, that's the right fit. That's the right fit. But it's not one that should be your first option to have that there. I tend to run cables. I was using a wireless repeater in my house, but I was really on the edge of what I could really do, and the performance just wasn't that good. I was getting too much interference also from other things in the house. Good example, you turn on the oven, the microwave oven, and the wireless frequencies are just overloaded and things wouldn't work properly. So I ended up getting in the attic, running a Cat5 cable, dropping it down, and probably not what I should have been doing in my attic. I'm not the best person to be moving around in my attic and running wires, but maybe you can get a licensed electrician to do this. run some wires, bring it down. I crimp my own wires, put the connector on, and now I've got a jack on the wall that I can use to connect everything up. So it becomes useful to be able to have that there. Have all of those pieces available. It's one where I think if ever I started using more wires in my house, I've tended in the past not to use as much wireless, but now I'm using more and more. I think it's a shift because I'm putting more and more devices on the wireless network. I have an irrigation system at my house. It's connected to my wireless network. The doorbell is on my wireless network. My garage doors on a wireless network. I have other house things. I have at least 3 or 4 other things in the house that are on a wireless network. I'm trying to put some locks on a wireless network. Kind of going back and forth over whether I really want to put locks to my house on my wireless network. There are some issues associated with that from a security perspective, but it's something that could be advantageous in certain environments. It's one of those we have to figure this out as this Internet of Things, as we're calling it, as somebody who came up with this bad term, Internet of Things. It's not an Internet of Things, just more of what we're adding to an already existing network in our homes. We're looking at our computers as computers or tablets as tablets and everything else is a thing. No, that's not the way it works. It's much more than a thing. Those are pretty important components. My air conditioning system, my heating system is on a wireless network. All of these are pretty important major pieces of your home. And security is obviously a concern. When you start putting garage doors on it and someone could open your garage door, if they were able to find out how to get into that system, that's a significant security issue. So that's sort of the balance we go back and forth over all of those. If your fridge is on your wireless network and you're getting poor performance, how does that affect your milk? How does that affect the cooling of your beer? It becomes a little bit of an issue, doesn't it? I don't know that I buy that with refrigerators, by the way. They have those fridges that they thought they were doing well to make a refrigerator that could tell you if you were low on something so that when you were out, you could check to see if you were low on that thing. And they went through so many iterations of how to check to see if milk was low. Like this, to me, it was more of a fixing a problem that didn't actually exist. But we're very good in this industry of fixing problems that don't actually exist. We do this a lot, as it turns out. The best one I saw, by the way, was one that was just a camera that would turn on a light and your camera would turn on and you could see a refrigerator. There you go. Because that's what you would do. You would call home and say, can you check the fridge? Can you see if we need milk? And you open the door of the fridge, like, no, we're good. Or yes, we need milk. That's how it works. Okay, just simplify that. Turn on the light. Let me see. Oh, I can see the milk. Yeah, we need some milk. That was the best way to fix that one, I think. I don't need complication. It doesn't need to show me a front panel display on the front of the fridge. Did they ever catch on? I don't think they did. I don't think anybody really made it work. Now, I could see that being now a television, make it a TV on my fridge. But do I need a TV on my fridge? Let me just buy a separate TV panel. Because then if the TV doesn't work, do I have to get my fridge fixed? The folks that come to fix my fridge are really good at fixing fridges. The folks that come to fix my fridge, are they really good at fixing televisions? That becomes more of an issue. Now we're getting into this. Now we're getting into a different world of, do I buy a product that has this thing when that company was really never any good at doing that thing? Becomes a little bit more of an issue. Whenever I start working with Internet of Things, security issues are pretty valid, but I think some of the nonsense behind it probably just as valid. When is CES? Is that now? Is the Consumer Electronics Show? Isn't that the beginning of the year? That's when we get a whole bunch of here's what the latest nonsense is in technology for the next year. We get a flurry of nonsense technologies. Usually I see a lot of those appear right now. Usually that's when that is. Somebody in the chat room will tell me when CES happens to be. I thought it was the beginning of the year. I know that there's a number of very big trade shows at the beginning of the year, And for some reason, that one stuck in my head as being one of those. You can tell I'm absolutely tuned into CES because I have no idea when it is. That's one where usually I like reading the news reports and seeing what are people trying to sell me. Because every once in a while, these companies get it right and they're selling certain things, and I really like what they're doing. I want to say CES is now because I saw, speaking of Internet of Things, I think it was August that makes the locks, or is it August? I think August that makes the automated door locks. I think they came out with a door lock that works on these more corporate type doors, on the more commercial doors. Not corporate. There's not a corporate door. It's a commercial door. The kind that has the lock built into the handle. You ever see those? You move the handle up and it's locked, and you pull it down, it unlocks and everything. Well, I know CES ended. When did CES happen? When is the CES? When was the CES? Guys are killing me. When was the CES show? I thought it was a simple question. 5th rate. There you go. Thank you. So it was this month. It was just now. So I thought it was something that came through just now. The problem is that I know exactly when the Comic-Con is. For some reason, I don't know when CES is. Okay, maybe I don't know when Comic-Con is either. Is the big one still in San Diego? Is that really the big one? Although I think New York had a pretty big one last time, didn't they? Now we've moved completely off of CES and door locks, and we've moved into Comic-Con. Atlanta tends to have a good one, but not as big as the others. Oh, I need more than ginger tea, I assure you. But as I mentioned last week, I'm under the care of a board-certified registered nurse who is keeping me well medicated. I did take something just before this. I've been off the stuff, off the medication, off the pharmaceuticals for a couple of days now. But I took another one this time to dry me out because it was not a good morning. And I think it went okay. I think we made it practically 2 hours. That wasn't really a bad scenario. Wondering how close the practice tests you find online are to the real tests, or recommendations on good sites to use. You've been using one of these others that I'm not going to mention. There are a number of good sites out there, or decent sites for these. I've taken all of the questions that I asked during the study group, and I put them on my site. And you'll notice my questions, I won't say that they are patterned to be like the test, but they are not simple, here is an abbreviation, tell me what the word is kind of question. They're all two-step questions that you have to really know your stuff to go through it. I won't say that, I don't pattern them off the exam because I don't think that is valuable. I think asking a question that really asks you to pull that information out of your brain is the valuable part. So on my site, it's the one I recommend. Those are the only ones I've looked at. Those are the only ones I've vetted. Those are the only ones I bothered looking at the moment. So there's 200 Network Plus questions there right now at professormesser.com/pop-quiz. All one word, pop quiz. That's the one I recommend because I know what's in there. I know I've spent the time going through and making sure to the best of my ability that they're correct, that they're asking information that's topical, that it's all related to the latest exam. And I mark it as the N10006 Network Plus exam questions. If a new question set, if a new version of the exam comes out, I will mark it as such, and I will vet those questions to make sure that they apply to the latest exam objectives, those types either. That's what I think is important when you're looking at an exam question. You should not be memorizing the exam questions. You should be looking at the question and trying to understand why an answer was correct and why the other answers were not correct. It's hard for me to do that in the online format. It was easier for me to do that in my pop quiz books that I did for A+. But that's one where it was like that. Very easy to do that. Yeah, there were some questions out there online that ask you for two answers, and I got rid of those. So In fact, if you run into one like this doesn't make sense, or it's asking for 2 answers, the online version isn't set up to allow you to answer 2 of them. So all of those are gone. It's now just 1 answer on all of them. Like I said, they're not all perfect, but whenever I find one that's wrong, I fix it. I try to do it really fast. And usually if you pop into chat, you say, here's the one I was in this question on this set, and it is the question I had. It didn't make sense. I can either answer it or fix it or do whatever we need to do. And I think they're pretty well fixed up at this point. We've done pretty good at being able to do that. It's really a challenge writing a question like that would be for an exam. I think CompTIA even has challenges with this. It's hard to write good exam questions because there's so much to it. There's an art and a science both to crafting a question in a way that people can understand what you're asking, and yet you're really asking for a very specific answer that, if you know the answer, should pop up immediately and all the other ones should fall away. I try not to write a question that's a trick question. And I find a trick question is one that's telling you one thing and really trying to make you pick something else. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's not the point of the exam. The point of the exam is to test to see if you know these things, not to try to trick you to click something else because a word was put in a weird place in a sentence. I hate those. And although I don't like pick A, B, or C, pick A or B, it's none of the above, it's all of the above, there's some value to those questions as well. Those are the hardest ones in my mind. But whenever I write questions from my website, I'm trying to get you, trying to see if you can retain the knowledge. I want you to test yourself to see if you know this content. The point is not one you have to sit in front of the question and try to read through and parse out the English language. So I don't tend to ask very many of those. I think if you know your stuff, that the right answer should pop up. You should be able to answer it and be on your way. And if you don't, you should be stuck, and then you know what you need to work on. Because ultimately, you want to get them wrong. If you're getting them wrong, then you know where you should study. If you're getting them all right, there's no point in doing this anymore. You need to go take your exam for those. So good. Wow, you took your Network Plus exam on December 26th, just not even bothering with the holidays, jumping right into it, and you passed. So good job. I guess you passed. You didn't actually say you passed, but you said you did the questions and studied the material. My questions helped. So either you didn't fail horribly or you actually passed. So great. Okay, you did pass. Congratulations. Never know. You're never quite sure. And there's about a 20 to 30 second delay on me saying something until the time you hear it. So I'm the length of the sun away from you. You're not actually seeing the sunlight that just happened. It takes a number of minutes to get to you. It takes a number of seconds to get there and have that there. It's a little more of a challenge. Well, I think that brings us up on probably 2 good hours of the study group today. I want to thank everybody for joining us on the first hour, the live questions going back and forth. Those are a lot of fun, and I wouldn't be able to do it if you folks didn't show up. And being able to answer them along with me, it's always fun to go through the questions. I think I will have many more for you. A month from now, we'll do another Network Plus study group. There'll be brand new questions again. I make these questions up every month, so there's something new and fresh every time we sit down for this. If you're someone who likes going through these, maybe you like the Network Plus enough to sit for next week's study group is the Security Plus. So next Wednesday, same time, same place, we do the Security Plus study group, and I'll send out all the tweets and the messages so you know when that's happening as well. There is plenty more to do on the website between now and then. Hopefully I'll be a little less sick as a dog next week. I will work hard to make sure that will be a much easier study group to listen to at the very least. Thanks for joining us, though, this week and hanging in with us. I will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everyone.